It's one of the most confusing things about modern relationships. How a woman can meet a man who gives her almost nothing, barely calls, rarely compliments her, and somehow he becomes the one she can't stop thinking about. The man who doesn't chase, doesn't beg, and doesn't make her feel special ends up being the one she dreams about, obsesses over, and can't let go of. Meanwhile, the guy who gives her attention, consistency, and devotion becomes boring. It's not logic that keeps her stuck, it's emotion. Women are emotional investors by nature. They attach deeply to potential, not presence. When a man withholds his affection, her instinct doesn't say move on. It says try harder. She starts chasing the validation he refuses to give. The more he pulls away, the more her mind convinces her that winning him means winning her worth. That's the addiction. She isn't addicted to the man himself. She's addicted to the emotional uncertainty he creates. His indifference awakens her competitive instincts and her desire to feel chosen. What makes it worse is that modern society tells women they're empowered, independent, and emotionally intelligent. But when it comes to men who act like they don't care, all that strength disappears. She starts romanticizing neglect as mystery and sees rejection as a challenge. This psychological trap is why many women stay attached to emotionally unavailable men for years, believing they can change them. But the truth is, the more a man acts like he's nothing, the more she projects everything she wants him to be. And by the time she realizes the fantasy isn't real, her emotions have already turned his silence into her obsession. 1. The power of emotional deprivation. When a man withholds emotion, he triggers something primal in a woman's psychology, a hunger for validation that overrides logic. From childhood, women are conditioned to seek emotional approval. They're praised for being pretty, kind, or likable. And that pattern of seeking affirmation becomes part of how they measure value. So when a man refuses to feed that need, he becomes magnetic. His distance makes her question herself, and that questioning turns into obsession. She starts asking, "What did I do wrong?" or "Why isn't he interested?" And every unanswered question becomes a new reason to chase. Emotional deprivation works like a drug. The less she gets, the more she craves. The brain releases dopamine not from reward, but from anticipation. So, the inconsistency of his attention keeps her hooked. One text after days of silence hits her like an emotional high, reinforcing her hope that he does care, even when his actions say otherwise. She starts interpreting small gestures as major signs. If he looks at her differently, if he compliments her once, if he calls out of nowhere, she convinces herself progress is happening. But it's not progress, it's a conditioning. He's trained her to associate uncertainty with excitement. What she doesn't realize is that she's addicted to emotional contrast, not connection. The highs and lows give her relationship intensity that stability can't match. While healthy love feels calm, toxic attraction feels electric. And because modern women equate excitement with chemistry, they confuse peace with boredom. This is how men who act like they're nothing gain power. Their silence becomes louder than affection. Their absence becomes presence, and their disinterest becomes irresistible. Not because they're better men, but because they know most women can't detach from the need to be chosen. 2. The illusion of control. When a woman falls for a man who acts indifferent, she believes she can change him. That illusion of control is what keeps her trapped. Deep down, she doesn't just want his attention. She wants to be the one who breaks through his walls. She wants to be the exception to his detachment. Every cold response or dismissive gesture becomes a challenge, not a warning. She convinces herself that if she just says the right thing, shows enough loyalty, or proves her worth, he'll finally see her value and open up. That's the delusion that keeps her coming back. In truth, what she's chasing isn't the man. It's the validation of being the one who finally got him to care. This is why women often confuse emotional struggle for depth. She tells herself, he's complicated, or he's been hurt before, romanticizing his coldness instead of recognizing it as disinterest. But the more she tries to earn his affection, the less he gives. And that creates a feedback loop of power imbalance. He learns that his silence controls her, that his lack of effort keeps her effort alive. And because women are wired to seek emotional resolution, she can't walk away until the story feels complete. Yet, he never gives her closure, so the story never ends. It's not love, it's self inflicted captivity disguised as passion. The illusion of control convinces her that she's choosing to stay, but she's really trapped by her own ego. She can't accept that she doesn't matter to him as much as he matters to her. So, she clings to every moment, trying to prove she's not like the others. What she doesn't realize is that the man who acts like he's nothing thrives off her, trying to make him something. The more she invests, the more powerful his indifference becomes. 3. The thrill of uncertainty. Uncertainty is the fuel that drives her emotional addiction. The more unpredictable a man is, the more a woman's mind stays locked on him. When he's warm one day and cold the next, she doesn't walk away. She doubles down. Her brain starts operating on a reward system built on hope, not reality. Each time he pulls away, her anxiety spikes. Each time he returns, even briefly, her relief feels euphoric. This emotional roller coaster releases powerful neurochemicals, dopamine, cortisol, oxytocin, that reinforce the attachment. She begins to equate his inconsistency with emotional depth as if the pain validates the connection. The problem is uncertainty creates intensity but destroys safety. And in relationships, women confuse intensity for love because it feels alive. Stability, on the other hand, feels dull. When a man consistently loves her, she relaxes, but when he keeps her guessing, she obsesses. That obsession gives her a sense of purpose, something to fight for. Even though the fight is imaginary, it's a psychological loop that traps her in constant anticipation. She stops focusing on whether he's right for her and starts focusing on how to keep his attention. That shift is where she loses herself. Every interaction becomes a test, every silence becomes a threat, and every small gesture feels like proof of progress. The man who acts like he's nothing doesn't need to try. His unpredictability does the work for him. He becomes the emotional puzzle she can't solve, and her need to solve it becomes the addiction. The cruel irony is that while she's busy decoding him, he's not thinking about her at all. His detachment is effortless. Her obsession is exhausting, and that imbalance is what keeps her emotionally enslaved to the one man who gives her the least. 4. The ego trap of validation. Every woman wants to feel chosen, but when she meets a man who acts like she doesn't matter, that desire becomes obsession. It's no longer about love, it's about ego. She starts needing his attention, not because she truly cares for him, but because his rejection makes her question her value. The moment she senses he doesn't see her as special, she subconsciously sets out to prove him wrong. Her ego can't accept invisibility, so she fights for recognition. She dresses better, texts first, plays it cool, overthinks every word, all in hopes of getting him to notice her again. What she doesn't realize is that the more she tries, the less power she has. The man who acts like he's nothing understands this dynamic. He knows that silence hurts more than words, that ignoring her triggers her insecurities faster than rejection ever could. By not chasing her, he becomes the one being chased. The relationship flips. He holds the emotional power, she holds the emotional weight, and in that imbalance, her ego starts feeding on hope instead of reality. Every time he gives her a tiny bit of attention, she interprets it as a sign she's winning. But she's not winning. She's being managed. Her self-worth becomes dependent on his unpredictable approval, and that's when she loses control completely. The addiction isn't to the man himself, it's to the feeling of almost being validated, the fantasy that maybe one day he'll see what she sees in herself, The tragic truth is that he won't because his power lies in not needing her. And the moment he senses that she's willing to do anything for his validation, he loses respect and gives even less. It's a vicious cycle. Her ego seeks his attention, and his indifference feeds her obsession. Until she breaks that loop, she'll keep mistaking emotional starvation for passion. 5. The fantasy of emotional depth. When a man acts detached, women often assume there's something deep beneath his silence. They convince themselves that his distance isn't coldness, it's mystery. They believe he's hiding pain, trauma, or complexity that only the right woman can unlock. That belief keeps them emotionally invested long after reality proves otherwise. The truth is, women romanticize emotional unavailability because they mistake it for strength. A man who doesn't overshare, who isn't expressive, appears in control, and control to a woman seeking safety through emotion feels powerful. She interprets his calm detachment as confidence when in reality it's just disinterest. But the more he withholds, the more she imagines. She starts building a version of him in her mind, someone more sensitive, more passionate, more capable of love than he actually is. That fantasy becomes stronger than the real man. She stops seeing him for who he is and starts chasing who she wants him to be. And because she's emotionally driven, the fantasy feels more real than facts. She tells herself that his silence is proof of depth, that his inconsistency means he's struggling, that his coldness is just fear of getting hurt. Every excuse becomes emotional currency she uses to stay invested. But what she's really doing is projecting her emotional capacity onto someone who doesn't deserve it. She's loving her own imagination, not him. The man who acts like he's nothing benefits from this illusion. He doesn't need to perform or pretend. Her mind does the work for him. By the time she realizes that his mystery was just emptiness in disguise, she's already too deep to walk away easily. The fantasy collapses, but the emotional bond remains. And that's why women stay addicted, not because of who he is, but because they can't let go of who they hoped he could become. 6. The chemical bond of confusion. When a woman becomes addicted to a man who acts like he's nothing, what she's really addicted to is the chemical storm that his inconsistency creates. Every time he withdraws, her brain releases cortisol, the stress hormone that heightens anxiety and alertness. When he returns, even with the smallest gesture, a message, a glance, a call, her brain releases dopamine and oxytocin, the hormones tied to pleasure and attachment. That emotional swing becomes her drug. It feels like passion, but it's just chemical chaos. The highs are intoxicating because they follow deep emotional lows. That contrast makes every little moment with him feel monumental. He doesn't have to do much. His scarcity makes his presence valuable. And because her body reacts stronger to inconsistency than to stability, she mistakes those emotional spikes for evidence of real connection. In reality, she's trapped in a biochemical loop that keeps her chasing a fix. Her body craves the rush of relief after his silence ends. She thinks she misses him, but what she really misses is the hit of dopamine that follows his rare attention. That's why she can't detach, because it's not just emotional, it's physiological. He becomes the source of her emotional pain and her only form of relief. That's how addiction works. What makes it worse is that the body begins to normalize stress. She starts to confuse tension for love, pain for excitement, and unpredictability for intimacy. The relationship becomes a form of self-harm disguised as devotion, and the man, whether he knows it or not, controls her through chemical manipulation, not care. The longer it continues, the more she forgets who she was before him. The addiction becomes identity, and by the time she realizes it's not love, it already feels impossible to leave because withdrawal from chaos feels emptier than staying trapped in it. 7. The awakening and the withdrawal. There comes a moment, often quiet and devastating, when a woman finally sees the truth. The man she's been addicted to was never complicated. He was simply uninterested. The love she thought she was building was actually her own reflection projected onto someone who gave nothing back. This realization doesn't come through logic, it comes through exhaustion. One day she wakes up tired, not from missing him, but from missing herself. She starts to notice how much of her life revolved around waiting for crumbs of attention, how her moods depended on his silence, how she confused his detachment with depth because she needed to believe there was more to him. That's the beginning of withdrawal. It hurts not because she lost him, but because she has to face that she built the entire relationship in her mind. She mourns the fantasy, not the man. But this pain is where freedom begins. The moment she stops chasing answers and accepts indifference as closure, she regains power. She starts to understand that no amount of effort can make a man value what he doesn't. She learns that love isn't proven through struggle, it's revealed through peace. And the more she rebuilds her self-worth, the more she sees how his lack of care exposed her own lack of boundaries. Healing doesn't come from getting him back. It comes from no longer needing him to explain why he left. When she finally detaches, the addiction dies. The man who acted like he was nothing fades into irrelevance, and she realizes he always was. The power she once gave him was just misplaced energy that belonged to her all along. And once she reclaims it, she never chases indifference again, because she's learned that real love doesn't require pain to feel real. At the core of every woman's addiction to a man who acts like he's nothing lies a deeper truth. She isn't chasing him. She's chasing the version of herself she feels when she's wanted. His rejection exposes her insecurities. His silence amplifies her doubts, and his rare attention gives her temporary proof that she's enough. That's why she stays. Not because he's powerful, but because he mirrors the parts of her she hasn't healed. When she learns to stop needing him to reflect her worth, she breaks free. The addiction ends when she realizes that real love doesn't make her question her value. It confirms it. A man's indifference doesn't define her desirability. Her reaction to it does. The men who act like they're nothing gain control because women keep trying to find meaning in emptiness. But once a woman sees that his detachment isn't depth, just emotional laziness, she stops trying to fix it. She stops performing for validation. She stops mistaking attention for affection. And when that happens, everything shifts. The same man who once felt magnetic starts to look ordinary because her self-worth no longer needs his recognition to survive. That's the quiet victory when she stops craving the thrill of being chosen and starts choosing herself. In that moment, the power dynamic reverses. He loses his mystique. She regains her peace, and she finally understands the truth that ends the cycle forever. A man acting like he's nothing only has power over the woman who hasn't realized she's everything.